up today. Our program today begins where we left off with photosynthesis. So just a reminder, if you're going to retake the quiz, that needs to happen by Thursday after school. So Thursday, 4 p.m. would be the last time you could start retaking your quiz. So, you could have your 15 minutes or whatever, but you need to be here as close to 4 p.m. on Thursday as you can. I will be here for only 15 minutes after school today. I have to run over to Central and get my second vaccine. And so I will be here from 4 to 4:15, and then I got to split. So if you're coming in today, you need to be here at 4 o'clock to do that. Yes. I got the Moderna, so I'll probably be sick tomorrow, but that's okay. So I may not be on my office hours. And I would have had it where you could come in tomorrow, and I still can. I can send out a note letting you know if I'll be here or not. But if you're able to pop in tomorrow and retake the quiz, that might be an option. Just right now, just think that I'm not. It's not an option. And if you get a little remind text or something that says, "Hey, actually, I'm here. I'm fine. You can come by if you want." Then you can come by. Okay. So we'll just see how it goes. I'm crossed fingers that I'm not incapacitated for 12 hours, but we'll see. Okay, so that is that's how you fix your quiz grade if you want. I am going to roll those into the grade book Thursday at 4 p.m. Basically, that means I'm not actually going to put them in your Infinite Campus gradebook until everyone has had their opportunity to retake it, so that you're welcome. You don't get a horrible grade in your gradebook right away, and then your parents ground you or something. Okay, so that's kind of what I do. I don't usually roll them into the actual gradebook until after the window for retakes is done. So you kind of have to know what's going on. Did you have a question? Okay, cool. All right. So everybody got any questions about that? Don't try to retake that quiz on Friday, because I'll be like, sorry, it's done Thursday at 4. Don't try to do it on Friday. You have to hit your deadlines. That's always been a thing. Okay, so we're going to do cellular respiration today. And I guess I feel like writing that in cursive, so there you go. Hopefully you can read cursive. Cellular respiration. So cellular respiration, unlike photosynthesis, cellular respiration is done by all organisms in some way, okay? Photosynthesis is just autotrophs. So that means organisms that can create their own food from the sun. And that's only our plants, some of our algae, some of our prokaryotes can do it, but not nearly all. Cellular respiration is done by all organisms in some form. Now, there will be some slight adjustments in some of our things that live in really weird and hard to reach places, but you can just know that if there's a test question or a quiz question that says, which organisms do photosynthesis and which organisms do cell respiration? Photosynthesis is going to be autotrophs. Cell respiration is going to be all of them. Okay? We have a little problem because students will want to assign one to one and one to the other. Like cell respiration is autotrophs, photosynthesis is autotrophs and cell respiration is heterotrophs. Not the case. Photosynthesis is autotrophs, cell respiration is all. Okay, you guys need to stop playing because I'm getting irritated. All right. So our formula for cell respiration is really, really familiar. It's actually just flipped from photosynthesis. So if whatever you used in photosynthesis, whatever your reactants were, they become the products here, and whatever the products were of photosynthesis, they become the reactants. So that's pretty easy to remember. So basically, once you've got one memorized, then you have both of them memorized. You just have to flip the arrow, okay? So what do we have here? Well, we have glucose. Okay, so glucose plus oxygen yields carbon dioxide and water. So we gotta get some glucose up in here, some sugar up in here, so that our cells can do this. Now remember, this is done on a cellular level, right? So this is like we're talking about what our cells need, and this is now we can talk about our cells because we couldn't with photosynthesis. We don't do photosynthesis, but now we can talk about our cells. So we have to get glucose to our cells. Now I know that that you're not sitting around just munching on glucose, right? Like this isn't part of your diet. Like you don't like I need a glucose salad or something like that. Like that's not how it works. Your digestive system is in charge of breaking down the foods you eat. A lot of those foods will break all the way down to glucose. Okay, so you might have a big starchy food. You might have carbohydrate, right? So you might eat some bread or some tortilla or something that's high in carbs. Your body breaks that down. It takes those long chains of carbohydrates and it chops them and chops them again, chops them again. You have all this gastric acid that just chops that stuff up until eventually it gets down to the base unit, which is glucose. Okay, you might be eating fruit. Got a lot of fructose in there. That is a form of sugar that actually has the same formula as glucose. And so your body can use it very similarly, but it's got to break down those fruits. So your digestive system is in charge of getting your food down to the level that your cells can use them. That's its whole entire job. I don't know if you realize this, that once you're eating something, your salivary glands make all that spit, and that starts to break down your food automatically. If you just hold something in your mouth, it'll dissolve. Have you noticed this? Like you can just hold it in your mouth and it'll break down. It's because they're acidic. There's some acid in there. And then you swallow it. Your stomach's very acidic with help from your liver and some of your other things. And then it goes into your small intestines, and that's where all the blood supply comes in. Your small intestines comes in and has this network of blood vessels that touch it. And what happens is it's broken down to the point where now the nutrients can cross into your bloodstream. When the nutrients diffuse into your bloodstream, then they get carried all over your body to your cells. And that's how that works. Okay, it's really simple. And it's not just glucose. You also need all kinds of things. You need vitamins to make some of your signaling processes work. You need all kinds of different things. Some amino acids to make proteins, but that's where this comes from. Okay, we eat it. All right, and so does any other heterotroph. If they can't make their own, so plants don't have to eat it, right? They don't have to eat things with glucose because they make their own. Right, so they got kind of a cool system going on there because they just make their own glucose and then use it. We can't do that, so we got to eat it. Okay, does that make sense? Everybody cool with that? All right, cool. So this happens in the mitochondria. So let's draw a little mitochondria and label it. So where the other one was chloroplast, we now have mitochondria, and I tend to draw them a little less exaggerated than they really are, but you will notice now. Whoa, that got a little crazy right there, sorry. Okay. The mitochondria, so this is the mitochondria. There it is. Has an interesting inner membrane. So where the chloroplast had just like two little lines, one was the outer and one was the inner, and you probably have the chloroplast drawn pretty close to where you are now. You can see that the inner membrane kind of mimicked the outer membrane, right? It was just like, here's the outer membrane, and here's the inner membrane. Not so with the mitochondria. The mitochondria has a very strange inner membrane. Okay, and here's the outer membrane. I'm just putting MB for membrane. Anytime you see folds like this, anytime you see insanely folded things like this, you should just think, this is increasing surface area. Because if you stretched out that inner membrane, it would be bigger than the outer membrane, right? So obviously something important is happening on that inner membrane to require such large surface area. And it's true. So anytime you see a big fold like that, just think, oh, increase of surface area. That's what that's for. You can see that on cells. You can see like some cells have little things that stick out, increased surface area. You see that actually in our small intestines. They have little folds like that, increasing the surface area so they can absorb stuff better. Yep.
Our brain too, right?
Our brain is very folded. Yep, because it's all nice in there.
Do you know how big a brain is, like if they ever unfold?
If they ever unfolded it, yeah, I don't know. I know that it's quite heavy, so it probably would be big if you could unfold it. But more, it has like declivities. I don't think you can't really unfold it. It's just made like these declivities in there. So anyway, no, it's not like the intestines, which you can pull out the intestines and make them long. But the brain is more like just declivities in it. So it's like a mass that has weird spots. So, okay, cool. All right, so these little bumps, this is going to be really hard to label. So try to figure out how to help yourself understand what you're labeling here. These little bumps that kind of go into the center right here. So all these little bumps here, we call these cristae, which is kind of an interesting name, but it's hard for you to know like what you're actually labeling. So I'm going to label like a couple of them. I don't know how you want to label yours, but those are called cristae, and they're actually what it's talking about, like an increase in surface area. So they give them a little name there. Honestly, I'm not sure why we have to know that, because we have to know it in AP as well, but we don't ever really seem to use that term outside of that's just what they're called. Okay, kind of similar to the grana, you know, the stack of thylakoids in the photosynthesis, I mean, in this color class, and I'm like, I mean, we talk about thylakoids all the time, but we hardly ever talk about grana. So, or granum for one of them. Okay, this gooey stuff in the center is called the matrix. Yeah, if you've seen the Matrix movie, that's kind of cool. A portion of the of cell respiration occurs in the matrix. That's cool. So this is like the cytosol of mitochondria. Kind of like the stroma was the cytosol of the chloroplast. Very same, only this is called the matrix. Okay, so we've got our inner membrane, our outer membrane, our matrix, our cristae. What am I forgetting? I don't think I'm forgetting anything. If I am, it'll come to me in a second. All right. Cellular respiration happens in 3 parts. Photosynthesis happened in 2 parts. So we've got one more part to learn than we did photosynthesis. And so I'm going to tell you where they happened and what approximately you get there, okay? And that'll be about it, honestly. It's kind of a cool process. Okay, so we're making ATP. Do you know what ATP is?
Energy.
All the power, energy. So ATP. So our goal here for cellular respiration is to make ATP, and that is cellular energy. Okay, it is a molecule. It is a cool molecule. It's a molecule that is able to store energy that the cell can use for any of its processes. And you know things like this. Active transport requires ATP. You can't cross things against their concentration gradient unless you have some sort of cell energy. ATP is the energy of choice. Okay, it's the currency of the cell. If you have no ATP, you're not going to make it for very many minutes, okay? Case in point. You can pass out, not have oxygen to your brain for about 6 minutes before you start to experience some sort of brain damage. Much longer than that, and it will be dead, okay? That's not because your brain needs air because it needs to float around or something, okay? That's because you have run out of ATP. You have no energy left for your brain to do its processes, and it dies. Okay, that is like you have to have ATP, and you have to have it right now. There's no taking a break from having ATP. Okay, so it's super important. This is the process in our cells that creates it. Nearly every cell in your body has mitochondria. Red blood cells, not so much. All they're doing is carrying stuff. That's about it. All the rest of your cells, of course, dude, there always has to be exceptions. I thought of 2 more exceptions, not going to mention them. Okay, so almost every single cell in your body has mitochondria because it has to have ATP for that cell. So every single cell is like requiring this to function. And so that's what we're trying to do here. So we're going to start, I'm going to erase this little mitochondria sign. I'm going to start outside the mitochondria. Step 1 is called glycolysis. Okay, glycolysis job is to break glucose apart. Okay, start working on your root words. If you're going to go into biology of any sort, you need to start understanding root words because these little words Sometimes our biology words are really big, like really, really big. And if you can just chunk apart the word into pieces, then you will be able to not have to do so much memorizing. It's just easier to know what the heck is going on, especially if you're going into medical. So lysis means break apart. The cell will lyse. You can have, there's lots of lysis times things that we talk about. Glyco is not Geico, okay? Glyco is sugar. So that literally means sugar breaking. That's the name of that step. It is breaking glucose into parts that can be used, okay? So it begins with glucose. Okay, and it produces 2 ATP. Approximately. Should put a little approximate equal sign. Approximately. It produces approximately 2 ATP. We can't ever say for sure how much these things are going to produce. Sometimes things in the cell goes wonky. I think I have an extra line on my equal sign. Yeah.
Like produces 2 ATP like per second?
No, per glucose.
Oh, per glucose.
Yeah, per glucose. So it produces, every time there's a glucose that comes through, glycolysis itself makes approximately 2 ATP. Okay? Yes?
So, like, the plants do photosynthesis to get the glucose and that.
Yep. Yes.
What is like the chemical equation for ATP?
So it is basically a nucleotide. It's an adenine, it's a ribose, and it's phosphate. So it's too much for you to have a chemical equation. I mean, I don't know it. I mean, I know phosphate is PO4, adenine, oh god. So adenine is a nitrogen space, so it would be long. But it's basically a nucleotide. It just has 3 phosphates instead of 1. And that's the difference. It's kind of cool, actually. So it's an RNA nucleotide because it's ribose sugar.
So is it like only made from glucose or are other components
made? So it is other components. Well, yes. Actually, it's not made from glucose at all.
Okay.
The energy from glucose is transferred into it.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so now we have an intermediate part here that's going to go into the mitochondria, but I'm not going to tell you all of their names, okay? It's just, you have an intermediate sugar. You have a 3-carbon sugar. It's been broken from its 6 carbons, right? Remember C6H12O6, so it has 6 carbons, glucose does. And it's been broken now into a 3-carbon sugar, and that 3-carbon sugar is going to enter the matrix, okay? Our second step, which, see, I drew my little membrane so, folded that I don't even have room to write my second step. The second step happens in the matrix. Oh, I should put this over here. Sorry, one more bullet. Occurs in the cytosol or cytoplasm, whatever you call it. I'll write both. Biologically correct, it's cytosol. But we tend to use them interchangeably, right or wrong. That's what we do. Okay. So step number 2 is going to occur right here. I'm going to write it somewhere else. I'm going to write it over here. Okay. So and you can write yours below. I just can't write mine below because I don't have space. So step 2 is called the Krebs cycle. Okay, and it begins with a 2-carbon sugar. So just a little sugar. Yes, if you're keeping track, it went from 3 to 2, somewhere in the middle. If you're totally interested in this, we have to know every single step for AP Bio and what all happens in there. You guys don't, so I'm kind of trying to skim without leaving out stuff, but it's kind of hard because there are so many intermediate steps that you don't have to memorize. So I don't want you to be overloaded either. Trying to find a happy medium is hard. So it begins with a 2-carbon sugar. It produces roughly 2 ATP. and it releases carbon dioxide. And it occurs in the matrix. It's funny, some of my students have watched the Matrix and some of them have never heard of it before. I'm going to scoop my little recording thing over here. Here we go. Okay. So that's step 2. So basically what we've got, our glucose is broken down, and then the products of that move into the matrix where they're further broken down, and the carbon dioxide is released. Where do you think those carbons come from in carbon dioxide in this process? And the glucose, C6, right? So we're going to break it all the way down. And so when we do, we start losing carbons in the form of carbon dioxide. So that's where they come from, that carbon dioxide here. Okay? So this is the Krebs cycle, named after some guy, I'm sure. Guess I'll underline that so you can see it better. Okay? Pretty simple so far. Any questions on that? The third one isn't so simple of a name. Yeah?
Is the Krebs cycle the one that also floats citric acid?
Yes. Yes, aka citric acid cycle, though we typically don't call it that too much anymore. You'll see it that though. Okay. Questions about any of that? Does that make sense enough? Because I mean, it really is. This really is hard for me to like figure out where the happy medium is, where you know enough but not too much, but not too little. Kind of hard. Okay, I'm going to erase this then. Anybody need more time? So that I can fit my third step on here? Okay. Third step is going to occur on the inner membrane. You're going to love this one's name. Yes.
So for the blood pulses, does it also occur in the matrix?
Just in the cytosol right here. Yeah, I threw that on the end. Okay, this is oxidative phosphorylation. What the heck? Okay, well actually, oxidative phosphorylation is one of those words that you can take apart and you kind of know what's going on. Unfortunately, we haven't really talked about phosphorylation very much at this level. We talk about phosphorylation a lot more at the next levels, but this one kind of gets shoved aside. So when we are making ATP, this stands for adenosine. I'll write it down for you.
We have to.
You can decide. You're not going to have to write it anytime soon. Is that spelled right? Okay. Adenosine triphosphate. What do you know about this molecule just by looking at that name?
It has 3 of something.
It has 3 phosphates, right? And it's made out of adenine, which adenine is one of our bases, right? A pairs with T, C pairs with G. Adenine is one of our bases. So, I mean, this isn't a foreign molecule. It's pretty like, I mean, you're seeing repeats of other things in biology. Adenosine triphosphate is the one that is storing energy, okay? So that comes from what's that? ADP. Well, how many phosphates does it have?
2.
2, okay? So it comes from that. So when we write this in our class, we write this ATP and we write this ADP, and then when we're making it in the mitochondria, plus P, right? So when we do ADP and we add it together, we get ATP. It's just kind of simple. Miss Campbell, what do you need? It's in the cabinet above my microwave. And then when you open it, it might fall out on you, so be careful. I just put it in there. Okay, so what am I saying is being attached? A phosphate. What is the name of our process?
Oxidative phosphorylation.
So phosphorylation, right? So we're phosphorylating our ATP. So that it's like it's not that foreign of a concept, right? We're taking ADP, a 2-phosphate, and we're actually phosphorylating it, right? We're making a third one on there. And that's going to store the energy we got from our sugar, from our glucose. Remember, glucose, we got energy from the sun, right? We got some high energy photon stuff going on from the sun, and we wrapped it up into this big molecule of glucose, right? So then now we're breaking it down, and we're taking the energy we got from the glucose, and we're putting it into these little packets of ATP, because then the cell can use it. The cell can't use that glucose like that. They just can't. So that's what we're doing. So when we get to here, we are now phosphorylating large quantities of ADP, which the cell has. The cell just reuses those things. So once it uses the ATP, it'll break that phosphate off, and then it'll just put it back on here, and then it'll break it off again. So it's just going to reuse this molecule. Phosphorylation. Do you have a question?
No.
Okay. Phosphorylation is just simply the adding of a phosphate onto ADP. That's phosphorylating it, okay? What is this going to have to do with? Oxygen. You got to have oxygen to do it, right? So this literally is meaning I'm going to phosphorylate my ADP so I can have some of that bad boy, and I am going to do that with oxygen. Once you break the word apart, it's really not that big of a deal. It's like, I got to have some oxygen. That's where I got it. I just breathed in my oxygen. When I get some oxygen in there, yeah, you guys breathe in the oxygen. You're going to make the ATP. You know, you don't want to run out of that stuff. So when you bring the oxygen to the party here on step 3, you are going to make a lot of ATP. Okay, so step 3 is oxidative phosphorylation. Okay, it uses oxygen and releases water. Okay, it occurs, let's see, it creates large amounts of ATP. Now, I don't like giving you a number because it depends on a lot, but I'll give you a range. Could be anywhere from 18 to 45 ATP. Okay, and that's 45 is usually prokaryotes. They're really good at this. Okay, so we're usually more in the 20 range. For each, that is per glucose. Okay, so per glucose. And this occurs on the inner membrane of the mitochondria. Remember how I said lots of surface area because there's important work going on there? So you don't just have one oxidative phosphorylation going on. You've got multiples all around here. So it's creating a lot of ATP. Okay, I'm going to put one more on here. It's made up of 2 parts, and I want you to know them. There are 2 parts to it. It's the electron transport chain. Oh, I'm so sorry. I wish I could just teach it all to you properly. Okay, I'm going to break these words for you too to make them easier for you. By the way, we could just call this the ETC. Okay, so there's 2 parts to it. There has to be because it's a huge process, and it actually is very, very, very efficient. Works really well. Basically, electron transport chain is just passing some electrons down, transporting electrons. It's not a big deal. Electron transport chain happens first, and then we have this thing called chemiosmosis. And it's basically the osmosis of chemicals. When a chemiosmosis happens, ATP is just generated like crazy. Okay, so that's where we get all of our big ATP money, is right there in the chemiosmosis. So it's the osmosis, actually it's the osmosis of protons. But because we have electrons and protons involved. But you don't have to know all of that. In fact, I just really want you to recognize that when you see those terms, that they're in the 3rd step. They're part of the oxidative phosphorylation process. It's like osmosis, except chemicals. So it's passive transport of chemicals. Okay, that's a lot. So what questions do you have? You have a self-grading worksheet tomorrow that goes over all of it, just like you did photosynthesis last week. You have a small reading over the carbon cycle, which is just like the water cycle was last week. Nothing exciting there. Your quiz on Friday will be Cell respiration, basically just identifying the parts, the mitochondria, what happens where, and also the carbon cycle. Okay, and there may be a little bit of contrast, photosynthesis with cell respiration, just to make sure you got it. Yeah.
Wasn't there like a thing that says